is Sydney, and welcome back to My Dear Diary. I apologize for a lack of episodes. I think I'm going to undergo a personal kind of rebrand on here, so stay tuned. But I'm going to title these self-help episodes Heart to Heart. Maybe cheesy, I don't know, but it kind of was the first thing that came to mind. I think it pretty well encapsulates the idea of getting deep and uncovering the things that make us us, as well as trying to elevate, enhance, and better ourselves along the way. And so we can all be open and raw with each other kind of during these weekly heart-to-heart segments. I think it'll provide a space for all of us to better connect and then truly transform. This week, I'm really excited because I think if you really learn how to master it, it can be something really powerful. And that is how to create a positive self-narrative and keep it that way. We all have an internal dialogue in our heads, and it actually is super influential on our actions and how we see ourselves and how the world ultimately ends up seeing us. And that's why all of your actions are honestly predicated on the self-narrative. So if you have a negative one, it subconsciously influences your actions. And if you have a positive one, it can lead you to take positive steps in the right direction and create the life that you actually want. If you haven't picked up on it already, your self-narrative really establishes your sense of identity, purpose, and how you find meaning and see things. And so if we can create a positive one, your outlook on life will ultimately be more positive. A lot of times your self-narrative is just something that's subconscious. It's built on your previous experiences and the content you're watching, the things people tell you about yourself. So if you aren't taking the proper steps to actually analyze yours and build a self-narrative that you want, it can be easy to kind of fall into different mindsets that you might not even know that you've adopted. For example, if you were bullied growing up, it can be easy to kind of fall back into that complex, even in situations where you aren't necessarily a victim, because that's the way you've been taught to survive. I feel like it's easy to place the blame on a person who's developed this victim narrative and kind of criticize how they see themselves and say that they don't have like the mental wherewithal or perspective to see beyond that. But a lot of times, again, like your self-narrative is very subconscious. And if you haven't had the lived experience of someone who's not a victim or haven't been able to see the experiences you've had in a different light, then it's quite easy to feel like you are a victim in a lot of different situations, especially when it feels like the things that are happening to you are out of your control. In the past, it's been easy for me to fall into a victim narrative when it comes to dating. As a Black woman existing in predominantly white spaces, I feel like a lot of time I haven't been the one chosen. And I think that's due to a lot of different reasons. A lot of reasons that are outside my control. Nothing to do with my personality, nothing to do with how I carry myself, but just based off of the beauty standards that exist and are prevalent in the spaces that I'm in. So while you could say go to different spaces, there's times when I can't. Like in high school or college, I noticed that the people of color, myself included, were the last to get chosen when it came to prom dates and things of that nature. And it just felt like something that was so outside my realm of control. I can't control how the beauty standards are set in the world, and I can't change how people see me. At the time, I felt powerless, and essentially, I do think I was a victim of the environment and of the world. However, I have really worked on myself to not carry that mindset with me in every scenario or every space I'm in, and to realize that there actually are people who see my beauty, who see who I am, and appreciate who I am. So I feel like I used to walk into spaces thinking that no one here wants me and it's not my fault, but no one here is going to want me. I'm a very cynical and real person, almost to my detriment. Like I overanalyze something to a T. And so when I'm in different environments, I'm like, all right, it's all white people here. No one's going to want me here. Truthfully, that's how my mentality works. And maybe that's the truth, okay? Sometimes that's just the facts, but I have learned to never count myself out before I even give myself a chance. So being a Black woman in predominantly white spaces is objectively going to be difficult. And it's not like you can change how people see you, but you can change your mentality. And this might be painful for some, but sometimes I feel like I have to accept reality and accept the cards that I'm dealt instead of always succumbing to like the victim mindset. But I do have to change how I respond to things and realize there's nothing wrong with me. It's not a reflection of me. it's literally the world in a scenario. It is not saying that these situations aren't painful, because we're realistic. Changing your self narrative doesn't mean you wear a shield of armor and aren't allowed to feel certain emotions or analyze the things that are going on in the world. It's more so that you don't tell negative stories about yourself because of other people's thoughts, actions, or the way you treat you. You're realistic. Like, you understand what has happened and why things are the way that they are, but you don't let that be the prevailing narrative all the time. Also, you're succeeding power and your self-worth to like other people who aren't you and don't mean anything to you and shouldn't, and their opinion shouldn't count more than your own. So that's something I've had to work on, because I feel like in spaces and sometimes I've just counted myself out before I even get in the ring. And this could even be in corporate or just in different social groups. Sometimes I'm like, okay, I already know they're going to be not giving me the time of day, when maybe they will. I don't know. I just have learned to not lead with that and not lead as the victim. And I don't want that situation just of desirability politics to seep into how I see myself in other spaces and the way I carry myself, because it shouldn't be the prevailing narrative in my life. Let me give you a story. So recently, my sisters and I visit one of our friends in Austin. The first night in Austin, we go to a Halloween party and we met a lot of our friends' friends. At the party, this one boy dressed in a Willie Nelson costume comes up to me and starts talking to me along with my sister. I need to interject here because I feel like I didn't make this story brief, succinct, or clear, so let me set it straight. Basically, Willie Nelson's friend had come up to us and started talking. So the reason he even engaged in conversation with Savannah and I to begin with is because his friend was near us at that time. So if his friend's over there and he's alone, he's like, all right, let me go make conversation with these girls. At least that's how it came across to me. There was no personal interest in coming up and speaking to us. It was just all based on pure circumstance. The next night, our friend takes us to a different bar to meet up with some of her friends. And lo and behold, Willie Nelson from the night before is at this bar. So this night, our friend says to him, oh my gosh, meet my friends. They're visiting me. This is Sydney, Savannah, Samantha, my sisters. Come say hi. When I tell you, I don't know what happened to Willie Nelson. It wasn't Willie Nelson that night. It was the devil. He looks at me, fully turns around, no acknowledgement. The dismissiveness was on another level of crazy and super disrespectful, especially since we had just had a conversation last night. Like, do you have amnesia? Hello. Whatever. My sister and I end up talking to a girl. So we're okay. We're holding our own and we can always have fun. A trio. That's the power of being a multiple. We proceed to go to another bar, and Willie Nelson is at this bar too. Doesn't say a word to us. He's in a very deep conversation with our friend and some other girl. So it's the three of us for the rest of the night, essentially. And afterwards, we go to another place. He's there too. Again, disrespectful. So you get the gist. He acts like we are invisible. And why I know that is race-based is because as a Black woman, I just know he would not have treated a white woman that way. And there's really no explanation for it. And when you know, you know. So he's trash. I'm sorry. You need to get your character under check, because I will say hello to everybody I meet. Like, that's just common courtesy and common decency. And this is a self-help podcast, all about self-development. So I apologize for calling people trash, but he has some self-development to do. So at the end of the night, when we're finally leaving, my friend asks us what we thought about the people, and particularly brings up the one boy, Willie Nelson. And I just say, honestly, I wouldn't give him the time of day ever, because he was extremely rude and disrespectful. And that's that on that. Like, nothing else to say. I would not be going for this man in a million years, because he's not worth anyone of decency's time. And left it at that. And what I was proud of myself for doing was not discrediting my own feelings. When asked, I'm going to give you the truth. I'm not going to water things down because I'm scared of discomfort. And I'm happy that I didn't let it reflect poorly on me. Like, I wasn't feeling down about myself. I didn't feel like I was unworthy or wasn't valuable because one person wasn't giving me the time of day. But the old me would have been stuck in my feelings, been like, oh, it's so tough. Like, it's so hard, which it is. But instead of being down and bothered about one person's terrible character and the way that they see the world and their negative mindset, I decided to move on and go about my business. And I validate my own feelings, validate the reality that I live in, but I'm not tripping over it. I'm moving on because I don't have time for that. I hope that got the point across that your self-narrative is dictated by a lot of the life events that you had. So it's subconscious, but it also has a conscience element as well that is even more powerful in helping you change and frame the way you see yourself. And I think a lot of times people think that the best way to kind of change your self narrative is to lie to yourself. Like, just be delusional, just lie. Just be like, no, that doesn't happen. No, I'm amazing and perfect, this XYZ. And I think lying doesn't work because until you fundamentally believe it, you know when you're lying to yourself, and it just never is lasting. I think the best way to actually change your self narrative is through action. Because when you change your actions, you develop a proof of concept and trust that is actually lasting and fundamental. So, if I'm trying to change my self narrative, the first thing I would do is actually follow through on the promises that I make to myself. So, let's say I am working on becoming a reliable person. Telling myself I'm a reliable person doesn't help if I'm always canceling plans, I'm never responding to people, I am always late or never following through. No. If I lie to myself and say, oh, well, I am reliable, then make excuses for experiences and times when I have been unreliable, then deep down, I know I'm not reliable and my self narrative will show that I'm unreliable. So, in order to change this, you have to develop habits to being a reliable person and a track record of reliability. There are things that I want to do to be more reliable for myself. And for example, I'm going to keep my space clean. So every week, I am going to deep clean my room and then whatever space I'm assigned, because we have a chore chart in our apartment. So I am going to clean my space and make sure that's done every week. So obviously, just saying I'm going to do it doesn't help. You need to take sufficient steps to make it easier on yourself. So, in order to make cleaning more fun, other than the fact that I enjoy being in a clean space, is I'm gonna listen to a podcast and actually listen to it every week while I clean and save it for that time. So it's something fun to stimulate me while I'm doing it. And that's something I look forward to. Or sometimes I'm think to myself, I'm gonna make myself a fun brunch after I clean. And that's also something to look forward to. So if there are little things that you can do to make keeping these promises easier for yourself, do that. For me, it's having something to look forward to. Like, I'm trying to get up earlier in the mornings, so being able to have a latte or a really fun matcha waiting for me after I go to the gym and get up early before work starts is super exciting, and that can be motivating. So yeah, it's putting the systems and processes in place so that you set yourself up for success. Even another thing that I've done that's helped me get up a little bit earlier is setting my alarm on my phone, putting my phone halfway across the room. So I'm forced to actually get out of bed to turn it off. And that does kind of help me because it's cold in the room and now I'm fully awake because I've had to get up, get out of bed, and turn off the alarm. So make sure that you think of creative ways to make sure your habits stick and set yourself up for success instead of just telling yourself you're gonna do something and then you don't do it and then you feel bad that you didn't do it and the cycle just continues. So fundamentally, I want you all to take away from this episode that change your self narrative means change your actions, and that helps you rewrite your story. And it also gives you something tangible to use so you can challenge the old stories that people have told you. Now, some self narratives may be more difficult to overcome than others. The one of being unreliable might be something that you can just do, like through action, but there's some prevailing stories that others have fed us. And one of those might be, which I've heard in the past, is that you are not smart. And I think this comes from people being compared to others, as well as maybe they, in a traditional sense, in the classroom, have struggled with their grades. And instead of having the support and help that they need to do better, they've just been fed and told the story that they're not smart because they couldn't keep up, or they're not smart because they didn't have the assistance needed or required to help them kind of excel. So that's you, and you've always found yourself as a person who has been perceived as dumb or not smart or illogical. I think the thing that you need to do first is like identify where these sources come from. And this is across the board, like identifying first and taking the time to understand the stories that you tell yourself is super helpful. But we're going to use this continued story of smart. Identify why you start to see yourself that way, and actually question who's telling me this? Are they a reliable narrator? And why am I allowing someone else's story to overwrite my own? And then if I was in this situation, I would try and identify what I consider smart, because I think intelligence exists across the board. It has nothing to do with just being in the classroom. It can be I'm a great communicator. I am very intuitive. I know how to be very savvy. I am a go getter. There's different ways to be smart, and some people excel in one way and some people excel in another way. And one does not trump the other, even though I think the traditional education system tries to advertise one. And not everyone's going to have the growth mindset to think like this. And that's where your self narrative has nothing to do with other people's opinions. Because I've had this debate with so many people on what makes someone an intellectual. And they're going to be like, oh, they're successful in this one way. They went to XYZ type of school. And so for me, I'm still not falling into that mindset. So if I encounter someone with that mindset, their story isn't going to be the ones that impacts mine because I still know what I consider smart, and not everyone has the growth mindset to even understand and conceptualize that. So that's not going to be my problem. So your narrative cannot be based off what other people think because everyone exists in the spectrum, and that's not the story you have to feed yourself. But yeah, once I determine what I consider a smart person, the next thing I'm going to do is take action to be that. So if it's someone who likes to read and challenge common, like the status quo and common ideas, then I'm going to engage in that type of dialogue and discussions with people. I'm going to read books. I'm going to watch different documentaries or even just content online. Like it doesn't matter if it's on YouTube. It doesn't have to be a science journal publishing this stuff. It can be anything. And so now I'm matching the narrative of what I consider smart. If you think unconventionally and think outside the box, you will find ways to ultimately challenge and reframe your narrative, no matter how difficult or deeply rooted that narrative may seem. I think it's twofold. It's understanding why it's come to be, accepting the circumstances and cards that I'm dealt, while also not falling victim to it and rewriting the narrative in a way that fits my mindset, my lifestyle, and my own opinions, because I no longer have to be bound by the stories others told me. Now, are there real world repercussions to the circumstances that you're dealt with? Yes. And that doesn't mean your personal narrative will change the world. It won't change the environments you're in, and it won't change the cards you've been dealt. And that's the unfortunate thing. But your personal narrative will change how you view them and change how you react to them. And it subconsciously impacts your actions, and you no longer feel burdened by other people's shortcomings and their lack of perspective and lack of appreciation because you've rewritten your own story to solely care about your own narrative. And the last and final plea and cry, something I beg of you to please stop doing. Stop with the self-deprecation. Because why are we willingly saying negative things about ourselves to other people? I don't care if it's for humor. I don't care if it's just to kind of like sympathize with someone. I have sworn to never say negative things about myself to other people because it also points out things that you might consider flaws that other people might not even notice. So why are you putting that on display? I personally am a proponent of leading with confidence, so I will never put myself down, even if it's a way to relate, because that's not worth it. Of course, there's ways to show vulnerability, but undercutting ourselves in the company of other people is not the answer. So it might seem harmless, but if that's your consistent go-to, you start to believe it. So I would recommend just staying away. So I hope this episode was helpful for you and gives you a realistic perspective, because I think there's so many times people can say, oh, beauty skin deep, or that's not true, or just like be delusional. And I don't think that always works. Like sometimes you have to analyze and come to terms with reality so that you can change your own. So I hope these tips are ones that you can apply to your life and help you gain a positive sense of self that will carry you far and last. Since I need to build a self narrative of consistency and being reliable, I'll catch you next week.